Are you sure you want to live stream?
Please say yes.
Hi, I'm Flo.
We're here.
We're only 2.5 hours late. No.
Hey, we're never late. We're always on our time.
It's weird. I'm wearing glasses, and so the light makes it look like my eyes are just white, like Batman or a Ninja Turtle when they're angry or something.
Oh well, that's not scary at all. The new throwback to the Matrix commercials that are like where Morpheus's sunglasses are stark white.
Yeah,
which I found unnerving, completely ridiculous.
Anyways, I'm Pox.
Hi, I'm Couch Guy. I'm not really paying attention very well right now. I'm sorry. I will pay attention.
Welcome to the live, non-edited show that we're doing.
Because who needs editing when you're perfect all the time?
We just got back from NAB.
I still haven't slept very well.
And we wanted to go over some of the stuff that we found. We kind of gave you a couple episodes of what to expect.
And if you were following Twitter or Instagram, hell, even Facebook, I tried to my way through at least the first 2 days so that everything that I thought was neat was pictured. And I did that. So we're going to go over some of these fun things.
Yeah, so some of the fun things, parties.
Hey, we went to a party first night. Because these are clubs that Pox and I would never get into otherwise.
And it's free, so why not?
Not cool enough. That was actually a really cool party. This was is it Caesars? Yeah, it was in Caesars.
Yeah, it was at Caesars Palace.
This was the content creators party that was sponsored by Atomos, B&H, and Red. In my opinion, this is kind of taken over the Red party. I don't think Red even puts anything on anymore outside of this. So, it was fun. We met some people, surprisingly enough. We met people from the same area I'm in, which doesn't happen that often. We sat and chatted for a while.
Yeah. Did some live streaming.
Yeah, I tried. I didn't even look at it to see what it looks like. I was going to try to. And
it's just kind of sitting on the table looking outside and then kind of pan around a little bit. It looks good.
Spun around for a little bit.
But, I mean, there was no real content to it.
I didn't really do anything with it. I just wanted to see if we could do it.
Yeah, it could be done. We did it. It worked.
You know what? I will point out to you, and I think you and I are the only ones that ever noticed this. This is the first year that we've both been NAB where we didn't do a live show during NAB.
You're right. Yep.
I felt lonely about that. I felt kind of bad about that. Anyway, so first day of NAB, and guess where I headed? Because I knew they were going to put something out. I knew they would.
Of course.
I told you ahead of time they were going to put a freaking camera out, and we didn't know what it was, but they were going to do it because that's what they freaking do every year. And guess what they did? They didn't put out one, they put out 4.
Yeah, well, they basically did 2.
It's the same freaking camera with 4 ends on it.
Yeah.
Well, 2. Okay, that's not true. They put
6 cameras.
6 cameras out. So they made 2 different cameras. I think the one you're looking at right now, or could be looking at right now, is what is lovingly called the Ursa.
The Beast.
The Ursa with the windsock of a monitor, a 10-inch swing-out monitor. This thing has 4 monitors on it. It is a 4K camera. You will have the option of PL mount, a EOS mount, a Micro Four Thirds mount, or a no mount. You'll get a no sensor on it, and it'll just be an HDMI input. The ones that do have sensors have a Super 35 sensor. Not a stellar ISO range. I think it's 200 to 800. But it has XLR jacks. It has all this other stuff. And it's about the same size as like a normal ENG camera, which to most of us that's like a gigantic wubby for us and security blanket. So, interesting. I want to see it in the field, and they're not really shipping anything for a while. They said like July.
What was it, 6,000 or 8,000, something like that? Or
it's around $6,000 for I think the PL mount 6500 for the EOS mount, or flip it and reverse it. I can't remember which one's which. The Micro Four Thirds mount and the HDMI version are not released on pricing yet. They said July. I don't believe them.
Yeah, 6,000.
So 6,000 is probably fine for this camera.
Yeah. Just
it actually changed
twice as much as the other one.
But they also went away from this SSD system. They're now going for CFast, which is a new compact flash-sized system. And yeah, they've got traditional batteries. They're kind of going for the ENG market. Which, if you're going for the ENG market, why not make a studio camera? And they did. And it quite literally looks like a freaking iPad with a lens mount on the front of it. And I'm not exaggerating. This picture does not do justice to how somewhat ridiculous it kind of looks. But at the same time, it's very intriguing because it's a whopping $2,000 for a 2K version, and I think $3,000 for a 4K version.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that most studios will honestly give their firstborn for that kind of setup if they can make it work, and legitimately, and I'm being serious about that. Your average studio camera, even for the junker models, are in the neighborhood of $8,000 to $10,000 before lens. So, and that's if they're going for a moderate studio camera. This one, Micro Four Thirds, does not bother me at all in a studio setting, which is what this has. And to do 2K or 4K, and it's kind of pumping towards their switcher. But it kind of has this feature set that people are kind of looking for. The only downside is, frankly, that people may not want to use it with their switcher. But since the switcher's so cheap, what you can do is actually buy the $1,000 switcher and use the switcher as nothing more than a control interface for the engineer.
Yeah,
where he can just look at what camera they want to look at and can do the control settings on it.
Yeah, they also got a $4,000 switcher too that does 4K.
And they have a $4,000 4K switcher. So I think it's interesting. I want to see. I don't really think their lens options are there. I wish they would have went for a B4 mount versus a Micro Four Thirds mount, because a B4 mount is a traditional broadcast lens mount, and that would have immediately entered them into the market with everyone else. They wouldn't have had this stop block of, oh, by the way, no matter what, you have to buy new lenses, which is kind of going to piss off broadcasters because lenses are freaking expensive. But if you had done it right the first time and actually polled the audience, you would have put a freaking B4 mount on there and stopped dicking around. Not a problem. You can buy a Micro Four Thirds that has one zoom lens option that can be controlled from a broadcast pedestal. Anyway, not to be underdone, Red displayed the fact that they want 6K everywhere.
Yeah, they're also doing the studio cameras.
So they're doing not just studio cameras. They want you in big time broadcasts. I think they were semi-offended that suddenly the Super Bowl just latched onto the F-55 for the Super Bowl. And they were saying, hey, screw you and your 4K camera. We have a 6K camera that can do your sporting event. So they're now pushing live broadcast rigs. And that picture is of their rig for a live broadcast, a.k.a. sporting event. Their message this year was 6K everywhere, and they tried to emphasize that by pushing IMAX. And they, I don't know if they really are going to maintain this or not, but they tried to tell us the first day that IMAX had certified their resolution to be good enough for or equal to IMAX at 70 millimeter, which is a big fat joke to most of us who understand film. But if they want to say it and if it's legit, it's legit. But I'm not sure it is because they stopped saying that about day 3. They did say that IMAX was nice enough to do a printout of their 6K on IMAX, which that I believe. That's not impossible, and they had a very nice showing of that. Their big deal is they want 6K cameras on whether you're shooting a Scarlett or a Monster. I don't even know what their big it's a Dragon, but I don't know if that's their sensor or their rig. But
I think it's
they want 6K everywhere. They do have points when it comes to in the terms of the single camera that can do stills, video, or film. They want the same camera to be able to use for everything, which to me is kind of a, that's neat. It's not, that's not a bad thing to go for. Let's see, what else? Let's see. Are we on live stream now?
Oh, yeah.
Live stream is a streaming company. If you're not familiar with them, they usually are kind of the competitor to Ustream or YouTube's live streaming or many other things. But they had traditionally had this little box that you could buy and, kind of attach to your camera. This year, they wanted to make a more impacting statement, and they went for kind of a broadcast box. And Pox, I'm kind of taking over all the chatting on this thing, but I think they're trying to take on Teradek.
Yeah.
Not Teradek. They're taking on TriCaster.
So they have the Teradek for the cameras. They can do live streaming directly from a camera. And then then they have the Studio this year. I mean, I don't know how long they've had it, but they were really pushing it in an all new surface mount for it.
I don't think they've had it very much. And the truth be told, their little streaming boxes are made by Teradek. They're just rebranded with the live stream. But the catch with their live streaming box is traditionally they've only been able to go live stream directly to the live stream server. Now, those little boxes will, if you're doing a big venue production and you've got some wired cameras and you have a couple remote cameras, can now stream from those to these boxes that do the control panel where they've got like a studio in a box. And as far as you all are concerned, there are different tiers of this that aren't just super high end. Now, their boxes start at $5,000 and go to $20,000 or $30,000. But what Pox and I discovered was, they have a free version that allows 2 cameras and some basic, interfacing. B, they have a build your own configuration, which is exactly what piques me and Pox's interest at times, because for $800, I believe it is, you, the viewer, or me, this end, we can build our own box. And what we were told, and I want to hold them to this, is that this is a perpetual software that we were going to be entitled to all the updates in the future by purchasing it once. Which, if you're like Pox and you are doing internet broadcasting and paying for this software such as Wirecast, which every couple of years wants to bilk you for another $800 to $1,000, that's a big deal. Pay one time for $800 and you get updates for so long as you want the box and you can build your own hardware. Sure. Right, Pox?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds pretty cool. I mean, they're showing it here like a GoPro, your iPhone, your Google Glass, and you get your remote switcher and paying $1,000.
They had some pretty impressive ideas going on there.
They'll even sync the streams together by the lowest one, so they'll add latency to the fastest one.
Yeah. If you did have a remote camera used by one of their streaming boxes into this switcher panel, the latency is always an issue when you've got a remote camera like that. Well, it would dumb everything else down to the latency setting of that camera so that everything can be in sync, which is really cool because you always have that. It's usually at the minimum 8 seconds, maximum a minute. Because of the compression that happens on the other side. So that's hard to sink in the remote camera when you're using like an RTMP stream. So what I will want to point out to you, Pox, if that's legit and we could hack it to a way, this is kind of get my brain moving spur of the moment, but that potentially means I could put a box here with me and we could switch an event between the two of us, and I could send back to your RTMP server.
Yeah. Yep. That would work.
So we'll have to test that at some point and see if it really works, because I could test it without buying a box from Livestream. But yeah, that could be interesting to play with. Furthermore, while talking about people who are making cameras who probably shouldn't be making cameras, but suddenly started to, is AJA, who has some of the best customer service you can talk about when it comes to building cards and boxes and things like that. Decided to dip their hat into the making cameras with their new Scion. Now, the only thing that's really certain about this thing is the price. It's $8,000. It's going to be 4K, and that's about all they'll tell you about it. They couldn't give you the ISO range. They couldn't give you the sensitivity range. They couldn't give you the stops. What they could tell you is that they've worked really hard on it. What I like about it is the company. Frankly, I like AJA. They make really nice stuff. What I don't like about it is that AJA has a really bad habit of liking to have proprietary stuff. For instance, their recording media, they really want you to use their own recording sticks. In this case, this special SSD card that they put out for their stuff. I'm not a huge fan of that. Sony tried this for years, so did Panasonic, and they've all kind of got away from it. I think if AJA is smart, they'll get away from it, and they'll let third-party vendors get in there. But we'll see how well this camera goes. I don't think it'll be shipping until summer. By then, they've got a lot of competition because there's a lot of new cameras out this year. As far as some of the old favorites, Kessler Crane, we visited them in Zacuto. There wasn't a lot of new coming out of them. They put their parallax bar out. Not really anything significant, but they've got some really neat things that they've done with their CineDrive system. They keep on upgrading it, and it's pretty an amazing system. So they put a really big bang out last year with that. And I think by just upgrading and strengthening, you saw that happen a lot with a lot of brands this year where they said, for instance, Sony didn't put a lot of big stuff out this year, but they said, look, we're going to enhance the stuff you already had and show you how, we made better features for it, or we made new features, sets that you can use it in different ways. Well, Kessler Crane's a good example of that.
Their cameras are dependent on doing 4K with an external recorder. So they're kind of relying on, people don't want to buy their expensive version, the Atomos.
Well, yeah, they Sony, for instance, this year partnered up with Atomos, and I don't know if you're familiar with Atomos. Atomos only kind of popped on the scene about 3 years ago, and they made an external recorder that works with a spinning disc that is relatively inexpensive. And this year they put out 2 more new items. And they put out the Shogun, which is a 4K recorder, and it will record ProRes or Avid DNX from HDMI. And they had partnered with Sony, who put out a new camera, the A7s, which we'll talk about in a second. Anyway, their big partnership allowed them to kind of piggyback with a great company like Sony, and they are, in my opinion, leaders in the recording side, because you've got the Convergent Design Odyssey Q7, which is a good device, absolutely, but it's really expensive, and they really want to have some proprietary actions inside there in terms of codec renting and things like that. Whereas Atomos just kind of says, here, we're going to use the 2 most popular, profiles at 422 color space. We're going to give you, ProRes, and we're going to give you Avid DNX, and in some cases, I don't know if they do RAW. I don't think they do RAW. But they want to do it as cheap recording as possible and do good quality. And so this new device, the Shogun, can do 4K all the way down to whatever. And 120 frames per second possible recording. It's got some really good possibilities. As a result, they won some pretty good awards while they were there for Best of Show and Best New Products and all kinds of things like that. But Sony... I don't have any pictures of it, but they announced no new major cameras except for one that I know of was the A7s that we talked about. But their F55 series, they talked about a couple new add-ons being a shoulder mount style add-on for ENG use, and just some other feature sets that make it better to use, and how you can upgrade your F5 if you bought one to an F55 and things like that. The big star that both Pox and I really enjoyed was the A7s camera they announced. This is a full-frame sensor shooting internally at 10K with a 4K ability to export via the HDMI, so it can shoot 4K also to external sensor like Atomos. But here's the big deal.
Well, it's a 12 megapixel camera, so it's actually a lower megapixel.
Well, it's a 12 megapixel camera, but what we stopped doing was we stopped having the megapixel war, and we went back to what some of these people do well. They say, look, if we actually put the megapixels into an actual resolution, what the big deal about 12 megapixels is, it's 4,000 pixels across, which makes it a 4K camera and 1-to-1 pixels, which means it doesn't have to do downsampling, which potentially creates some of the moire problems that the Canon cameras have had. Now, that's not saying this camera won't have moire. No one knows that really yet.
The individual pixels are bigger to allow more light.
And they can be more sensitive.
This thing can see in the dark, man. It is cool.
Okay, so if you're at all familiar with ISO, ISO typically on most of our cameras that we've talked about have been between the ranges of 100 and we'll say 1600 gets to be about the point where it's acceptable ranges. You can shoot in 3200 and you can even shoot at 6400. The highest ISO that we had probably heard of until recently was, don't quote me on this, but I think the 1DC could shoot 100,000 ISO. Okay, and that was freaking amazing, and it was freaking grainy, and nasty looking. This camera blew my freaking mind. It's high-end ISO, and Pox and I played with it, and we cranked it up to make sure what it would look like, because I wasn't positive how it was going to look.
It's funny, people they set up these elaborate setups so that the image looks as good as it can. And the couch guy goes in, turns the camera around, and points it in the darkest area possible.
And I crank it up because I want to see how grainy it gets, because that's the key. If you can shoot something at the high ISOs, then it's worth it. If you can crank the ISO can go to the moon. If you can't use the image, you can't use the image. We crank this thing up, and guess where the top is? 409,600. Let me say that one more time. ISO 409,600. It almost has an ISO of 500,000. Okay, that is unconceivable to my brain in terms of photography, because those are so far outside of what film could do. Relatively, 3200 ISO was like pushing extremes into this high speed, film, and getting a 3200 ISO thing was like having grain the size of softballs. Okay, this thing at 3200 ISO is absolutely grainy, but what I'll tell you is the graininess of that is similar to a Canon 5D Mark II at 3200 ISO, maybe even less.
Maybe
it did not get grainy, that noticeably grainy in terms of having little twinkles in the dark spaces, until after 80,000 ISO.
Yeah.
I have never seen a camera be able to do that consistently and say, oh, well, you can shoot in 6400 ISO or 7200 ISO or one of these, unreasonably high ISOs and have a clean image. Because even 100,000 ISO is at the point where your eyes don't see that well. Okay, 409,000 ISO, 409,600 ISO at the top end is better than the human eye can see. It's almost better than some of the creatures that see at night can see. It was freaking amazing. I think that it looked like relatively grainy 16 millimeter film. At that point, I was referring to it as plus 6 dB for some of the studio or some of the older cameras I used to work on, where it was grainy and sparkly. You absolutely saw the noise inside there. But I don't know, Pox, how'd you feel about it? Like it was acceptable. Like if you were shooting documentary and that was the only way you could shoot video, it wasn't so far out of the extreme that you couldn't use it.
Yeah,
it looked pretty good.
If you wanted to,
a little bit of noise filtering on that through some software and post, and you probably could knock it down by half because it was so otherwise remarkably.
Yeah, it was
You know,
it was pretty impressive. So
so
no price on it yet.
none, and that's the disappointing side. There's no price and no release date. And the release date they anticipate's midsummer. I'm willing to bet this camera comes in just under 3,000. Comparable to other DSLRs, it's half the size or less. It's roughly the same size as the rest of the Alpha line. It's an E-mount sensor, and being a full frame, it's going to be a little bit different lens than your traditional E-mounts. But it's small, and it can do pictures,
Really
and it can
small.
do continuous pictures if you're going to do stills. It also has the ability to put an XLR mount on it, so you don't have to do second system sound.
Yeah.
And that's including controls and things like that. It shoots an S-Log, which is the gamma setting that gives you the best color correction ability. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that, it was pretty amazing. And for
Well, the
people
fact
like
they can
Pox and I,
output 422 4K
Yeah,
out of the
it
HDMI
was-
clean, which means
it
you can
was
put one of those
422.
Atomoses on there.
absolutely, and then you could be in broadcast ranges that they don't get pissed off about because everybody wants 422 for color space and things like that.
And they claim it's got a good autofocus too, a 25 point AF, which is something you usually don't get in a good
Yeah.
DSLR.
For people like Pox and I, trying to find a camera that kind of hits some of the bells and whistles you want while being form factor still kind of small enough budget wise and small enough size wise. This kind of hit all the bells and whistles, and I would say that I was pretty confident that I was going to look towards the Blackmagic camera until I saw the purple dot problem. After this gets out and gets shown and make sure that it really does hold up, some people shoot with it and I can see some
I
footage.
really wanted to get the 4K Blackmagic camera because it had almost everything I wanted, except it couldn't do low light, like 800 ISO.
It can't do low light, and
That's
it
what they're
can't
saying
take
it's
spikes
all it could do.
in light. It can't take spikes in light. It can't, it's really difficult on batteries, things like that kind of make it a detractant. This, you've got a brand name that actually means something in cameras, where Blackmagic is still so brand new that they barely have a reputation of getting products out. And even then they put them out and they don't work all the way. So I think Sony is kind of taking back that small form factor. And I think that, it's going to come in under $3,000, frankly. It's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,800 to $2,500 in my opinion. And with another, say, $500 in add-ons between an extra battery pack.
They're just waiting to see
and
what
the
everybody else
XLR
priced
mount.
theirs at that came out.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And I'm hoping that it's in the mid to low 2000s. Because if so, I really think I'll probably buy one. Because it satisfies my current need, which my current need is only 1080. I would like to buy the Atomos for $2,000 for $5,000 to get a 4K system that actually puts out in a format that I can work with. SSDs are probably out of my range. Shooting RAW is probably ridiculous at this point. But yeah, I will fanboy on this camera because it looks like it could be the answer to what I'm looking for. I can't say it's a perfect camera. There's no such thing as a perfect camera. But for what I heard and what I like about it, it would probably set me, for a couple years into what I do very easily. And I don't think I'd be ever ashamed about anything that I put out with this camera. I don't think I'd have to worry about little workarounds or am I going to be able to bring enough light to augment what I need like I would with the Blackmagic camera. Because sometimes you get used to shooting with, some of these more sensitive cameras. And then you have to go back and it's like, oh yeah, sorry, my LED is no longer, throw to fill up this room. We have to go for a bigger light. This kind of camera, if I can shoot in lower light, make customers happier. I can shoot natural light at night, which is a big deal. At the same time, I get a stills camera. So, and I'm shooting SD cards internally and externally on a hard drive that, I could choose a spinning disc or otherwise with the Atomos. I think it's a great option.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on.
Jib thing, or no?
Oh, where are we at? We're at the everybody and their dog. Can you imagine? The darling of last year was the free fly system. Free fly, yeah, free fly with their Movi.
Yeah.
System where saw people move like this and the camera stayed rock solid in the middle. Well, guess what? That wasn't exactly new technology. People had just done it differently, and they're like, "Oh, duh! You can hold this with your hands, and it's the same gimbal we use on top of helicopters." Well, because it's not new technology, it's adapting current technology. Everyone and their freaking dog had their own stabilization system, and I'm talking about there were probably 30 vendors. 30, do you think that's fair, Fox? 30 vendors?
Yeah, that sounds
Of stabilization systems.
sounds about right.
And everything from Chinese manufacturers to people honestly doing stabilization systems for their GoPro or the iPhone.
Yeah, people
We're
printing them
talking
out
hold
with
it on
their
the
3D
hand,
printers and
and you can just go like this, and your iPhone stays right here.
yeah.
You know, just ways that, everything's got a place.
Yeah.
So everybody had their own rig. I think that you're going to see a dramatic price. I think you'll see the good ones stick around. Movi and the Free Fly system has such a jump on the market that they will be the dominant dog for a very long time.
All the big movies are all doing handheld now.
Well,
Jerky,
and I think they're using the
motion
Movi.
sick handheld. Like that's the Captain America movie that I just watched. There was
Did you?
tons of handheld. And like it makes it feel more real. And like, no, it makes me feel sick.
Well, I can tell you the one thing that I liked, and so there were a lot of octocopters and quadcopters and things like that around. I'm not a big fan of right now of the octocopters because while they are amazing for what they do, they're also one of these tools that if you dump $5,000 into it, $10,000 into it, you are one court judgment away from having that thing being banned. Or being so restricted out that you can't use it professionally. And that's way too much money for me to invest. But for me, I found this lovely little company, and there's a couple of them that are out there, but I like this one. Because they weren't a Chinese knockoff or Chinese company, and they were an American company that was making this, but they made a really nice device. It was called Dactyl Cam. And this is a cable cam system where you can run a cable. I believe it was 1,200 feet. And it's a remote control. Runs down the cable, runs back. Just runs in that line.
Yeah.
But what that means is, one, it's safe. Or at least safer than anything you're going to deal with when it comes to a flying device. Which means no major insurance headaches. And of all the things that are important if you're on a set and everything else, you can repeat the same move in a predictable pattern every single time. That's a big deal when you're trying to do a commercial or you're trying to do something like that. You want to be able to say, all right, I'm going from point A to point B and I'm moving the camera like this.
Yep.
Okay, so that being able to replicate that shot in a certain time frame every single time the same way, huge, because you don't have time to waste. These guys shot a whole bunch of stuff up in Vail, and they did it in really quick time, and they were talking about it on their website. People were asking how they were able to get so many shots that were so many big sweeping shots and really amazing overlooks. They're like, we pre-strung all the cable. We pre-strung all this cable. So everywhere they went, there were these little cable lines running, and no one thinks twice about these cables. Okay? You take the system off, you take the new one, and you go plop, and you pop it on there and secure it on there, and then you're going to the next shot. And guess what? You don't have to stop production to charge batteries or to do all this stuff that you have to do with a 12-minute fly time, because it doesn't have to stay in the air. It just has to run down there and run back. Run down there and run back. And they have the ability to put the same kind of gimbal system that they have on helicopters. They currently are using this for, what is this? The big ATV, dirt bike, motocross stuff. So motocross shows are using this in some of the areas. They just run them back and forth on a certain camera angle. I thought it was pretty impressive. The small one is $1,000 without the gimbal. The big one is $10,000 without the gimbal. The small one can hold about 3 pounds. That's usually enough for what I need to have it do. So I thought it was pretty cool.
Well,
I like them a lot.
So the cameras or the copters that you hate, DJI.
DJI makes a nice copter. Okay, now I'll tell you, the Phantom and the DJI, they're one of the ones that everyone loves. They do a very nice job. I don't hate copters. I don't hate DJI. What I dislike is the fact that there are so many unexperienced pilots just cranking out right now. And the problem we're going to run into is just like the one that there's a guy who's going to get probably charges filed for flying one of these octocopters near a crash site. And it was just in the news the other day. I think it was Oklahoma or somewhere. And he was flying his octocopter near a crash site and prevented a medical helicopter from actually landing at the scene because he was flying around.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This kind of stuff is just frankly, shit that's going to get us all in trouble if we ever, try and use these professionally, because it's the things that, you got people crashing them into buildings. You got people crashing them into people. They're crashing because you're overweighing them. You're crashing because you can't see where they're flying. People are just inexperienced and trying to just shove the thing in there because they can make their quick buck, and it's going to ruin the whole thing for everybody.
Yeah.
So I would say if you've got one, practice the hell out of it before you go try and using this anything near people, or frankly, keep them away from people. They're not worth it. I think they're great little toys, and they're fantastic tools for the right person, but weekend warriors on these things do not apply because they are so dangerous. Hey, did I tell you what I did see there though? I saw the newest, greatest, mostest thing in resolution, because the resolution wars aren't over yet, right?
No, of course not.
Why would they be, right? No, in all joking aside, the resolution wars hopefully are somewhat over. But a company, I think it was one of the same companies that pioneered 4K years and years ago when it was first coming out. But Astro was displaying their 8K camera. Now this camera looks nothing like a traditional camera. It basically is a CCD or CCU with a controlling system separate on it. But the big deal is they do have 8K out there. It is nowhere near the ability to be used for a movie set, and I don't think anyone's going to want to use it right now. They told me that they were using mostly for research, and the price tag was astro-frickin-nomical. But because of the fact that they had put out months ago that they could do it, and they tested it, and they could do it, they brought it to show it. They made it. They got the sensors. They've got a clean image. They're using it nicely. There is a chance in the future we may see, if 4K takes off like HD, in reality, they're going to jump to 8K, because what does 8K mean? 8K means you can do pan and scan in a higher resolution than 4K. So,
well, I see when people are getting these 70 or 80-inch TVs, eventually they're going to have whole walls or whatever. You want it the higher resolution.
Well, or you may just say, the movie industry always wants to stay so far above, or at least higher end, than anything your local TV station could do. It's a need to make sure that no matter what, there's a reason to come to movie theaters. There's a reason that you have that higher, crisper, better thing that looks nice.
Well, yeah, you got to pay a premium for it. So
you're paying a premium. You're going to go see it. So it's, it's worth it to them. It doesn't really, in the end, they make their money back because you have millions of dollars. As far as cameras, what are we at to next?
The very last one that you had.
The Amira?
Yeah.
So Arri put out another camera. The Arri Alexa is the preferred camera for cinema right now, believe it or not. Not the Red, not a Canon camera, not even the Sony F65. It's the Arri Alexa. Well, Arri took what they knew about that and they said, okay, well, we want to try and get documentary filmmakers and people like that. So what they did was they made one for documentary filmmakers, and they made more of an ENG style camera. It's not cheap. It's not even close to being cheap. But what it is it's got a B4 adaptable front end where you can, like one of the mods for the F55 now, you can put that B4 mount for your ENG lens, which is the one you typically see with news photographers, on the front of it. And in a pinch, well, not in a pinch, but so you're out shooting that, you shoot your handheld stuff when you're out doing your follow the guy around kind of stuff. When you want to go do your nice interview on your big, pretty Zeiss PL lenses. You pull out the housing, you put the new housing on there, and you can have a PL mount lens on the front of it, and you have that pretty, really expensive glass you can shoot your interviews with. I don't remember what the price tag is on this one. I think it's 30,000 plus, but they're pretty, and it'll be
camera.
yeah, significantly more. But it's on par to what ENG cameras used to cost. So I can see this kind of being used because no one argues that Arri has some of the best imaging you can put out. And guess what? They don't put out a 4K camera. And they haven't put out a 4K camera. They're staying with their 2K model with basic compression with ProRes, or I think they're even going to try and do RAW now. I'm not positive. But they put out a really nice product, and everyone uses it because it has such a range. And it hasn't been contested yet. So other than some things that I saw, that's kind of the picture stream that came out of it. I could talk about all the interesting things that we saw and did, and otherwise for literally hours. But I've kind of dominated tonight's show. Poor Pox hasn't had a word in edgewise, but I don't know, Pox, what do you think? You kind of buzzed around with different different stuff that I did.
Pictures of the girls that were painted.
Yeah. If you see, I have one in the bottom that I shot tastefully on the Atomos thing. I did see a girl that was painted, and I shot her tastefully, and she was sitting down being painted. Yes, I didn't get any pictures of girls.
Right. Okay, here we go. I didn't get yours on there, but here's a picture that I took. But it's pretty far away. Just everybody getting their prizes.
I can't see what yours is.
Girls.
Yeah. So Atomos had booth girls that were painted with pasties on. So
yeah,
I wasn't really going to go into that, but whatever. Props you want to talk about. The one booth is going to get me banned from NAB.
Like, that's why you went to go to Vegas.
Yeah. Anyway, I had lots of fun. I tell you what, if you're interested in anything specific that we haven't talked about as far as just the basic overview, just like we talked about in the pre-show, we talked mostly about cameras and getting things because it has the most to do with what we've done in the past, which comes into shooting things, doing the webcast, things like that. I looked at things for streaming. I have a lot of stuff I looked at there. Pox did the same thing, and some things with IPTV and streaming and otherwise. We both looked at all kinds of production things. If there's anything specific you want to know about that maybe happened at NAB and wonder if we saw it or what our opinions are, put it in the bottom in the comments.
Yeah,
tweet me, message me, no problem. Engage us. I am at Tommy5C on almost everything I do. And Pox is at Walking Crow.
Yep.
At Walking Crow 98 or at Walking Crow?
I'm just Walking Crow.
At Walking Crow. And happy to answer. We'll try and address it if it's in the comments on YouTube here. But, NAB is a great time. You'll see lots of fun stuff, and we'll see what really comes out in the future. But it's a good glimpse at kind of where things are going. I hate to say it, but naysayers beware. 4K is here to stay. Everyone in production is moving towards 4K, so that doesn't mean it's going to be in your home.
Can do it. No.
It doesn't mean it's going to be in your home, but it does mean that it's going to be, as far as production and what we're working on. So
yeah, if you want to subscribe to the feed, I'm going to be doing some stuff with 3D printers. I got a 3D printer in. And
oh yeah, you bought one of those, didn't you?
So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. So we've kind of dragged on tonight. I'm sure I made a 40-minute show, which I kind of ramble on. But
yeah, so subscribe to the show. We do this weekly on Wednesdays. If we do a post-show, a non-live show, it'll be on Monday. Otherwise, they'll be immediately live on Wednesdays. So see you guys next week.
Bye.